from Arkansas's #1 trusted source for weather. This is a new podcast episode alert.
Hey everyone, welcome to yet another podcast episode with Chief Forecaster Cameron
and Founder Derek. And once again, so we've talked about a little bit about March 31st here in the past. We've also talked about, again, the our Chasecation as well. But, the one event that really kind of started our year off was the tornado that many people know about, the Rolling Fork, Mississippi tornado back really the week before the Little Rock tornado back on March 24th.
Yeah.
And this was one of those days.
Definitely. Just from a forecaster's perspective, this forecast kind of took a lot of leaps and bounds there. And, a lot of people... back in March, when this was all going on, this was before, the Little Rock tornado and everything, there was a lot of forecasting. You were in kind of a weird position when you were trying to forecast, because leading up to this event, we had a lot of events that were, underperforming, didn't do as big as we thought it was going to be and everything like that. So, naturally there was a lot of complacency with it. Oh, they said it's going to be a severe threat. That's going to happen. Everything was fine. This event, for Arkansas's perspective, was somewhat of a blessing for Arkansas, because it, model data had a majority over the state, had this big outbreak that we were looking at. The majority of that period, starting at, I believe, day 5, as early as day 5 from Storm Prediction Center, we had a slight risk in place for much of Arkansas, and then it went from slight to enhanced to a moderate, and there was a lot of concern, especially for our folks from Central and Eastern Arkansas. Well, during the day, we had a lot of morning rainfall, and I mean a lot of morning rainfall that kind of threw the wrench in the forecast, and a lot of people, when you look back to that event before the Little Rock tornado. After the Little Rock tornado, a lot of people were like, oh wow, this event could have been a lot worse for Arkansas. But before the Little Rock tornado, there was a lot of people that were, upset or just not even paying attention, because they thought, oh well, severe weather is not going to happen this spring. I'm not worried about anything like that. Well, unfortunately, it was Arkansas's gain, but Mississippi's loss. We were chasing that event. We started in Lake Village in far southeastern Arkansas, and there was actually a tornado warning here in Arkansas during that event, and we ended up chasing it, went into Mississippi. I do believe that storm ended up producing a tornado, I believe, up there in northern Mississippi, as it emerged out. But Arkansas just got, blessed with a combination of a lot of things, morning rain, and also the timing. Yeah. It sped through Arkansas throughout the day before you got all your ingredients in place. So Arkansas,
and not only that, but typical, as what's very typical with the March events.
Yeah.
Your warm front didn't lift north.
That's right.
So you were in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
In central and northern Arkansas, while you were in the 70s to near 80 across much of Mississippi. There was what we call a lot of mixing going on across much of Mississippi and Louisiana. And then, of course, I remember when we were driving out of the metro down into southeast Arkansas, you went from, we were wearing jackets and stuff coming out of the city. And then once we got down towards like Dumas and DeWitt and Lake Village, it got humid.
Humid and hot.
But
we had to get out of those jackets, yeah.
But at the same time, when that first tornado warning went off, we felt the warm front going back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
And that was when we realized, okay, we need to be on the other side of the river.
Yeah.
Because you can feel the cold air. You can feel what we call a confluence band. And that confluence band was basically, your separation of your cold air, of your cooler, more stable air, and then your warmer air warm, moist, and unstable air at the both at the surface and aloft.
Yeah.
And when we realized that, okay, this is all coming in, rain, stuff like that, outflow, etc., helped to stabilize much of the state. That was when, attention turned towards Mississippi, and, March is notorious for Mississippi outbreaks. February, March, those tend to be your Mississippi outbreak events.
Yeah, southern Texas, eastern Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, those areas, typically, if you go climb on, those are the areas you're going to see the biggest threat of seeing severe weather and significant tornadoes. So, yeah.
But as we went through the afternoon into the evening, we quickly moved out of Lake Village.
Yeah.
And then of course moved southward towards the Rolling Fork area, which of course many of you who go towards Florida every year, you pass right through Rolling Fork and may not even know it on your way towards I-20, on your way toward Yazoo City, and then of course on down towards Jackson and places like that. But it is a town sitting right along US 61, and as well as Highway 1 right there on the Mississippi River Delta. Now, as many of you know, you go right through it. It's a small town. Has a couple of restaurants, a few stores, post office, places like that. Most of the town is off of the main road. Was. And of course, we'll go into more of that in just a bit. But, this afternoon was really particular because we were watching the atmosphere transpire. We saw storms start to develop. It was developing down around the Lake Providence area.
Yeah.
Lake Providence on down south of the Shreveport area is where it first formed early in the afternoon. And we watched it traverse across Louisiana, was kind of producing, kind of not. And then, as it got closer towards dark, this is when your ingredients really came together. Your jet was a little bit slower coming in, so you kind of didn't have all the ingredients in place during the day, which is very common in Dixie Alley. You don't get very many. Unlike March 31st, this event was a very common Dixie threat, being near or just after dark. Now, if you had fast forwarded this to May, it would have been before dark.
Yeah.
But because it's in March, 7 o'clock at night, it ended up being a nocturnal event.
Yeah, and if it was in May, I would probably dare say it probably would have been a little bit further to the west too, because you have your southeast ridge start climo speaking, you have your southeast ridge start coming in and stuff like that. So it would have been a little bit further to the west. But in March, you still have somewhat of what we call a progressive pattern, and you always just kind of take an effect like, hey, the system can slow down just a little bit. Or in Arkansas's case, I actually sped up just enough to get it out of Arkansas's hair. But Mississippi had to, somebody has to deal with it. No matter where it ends up, someone has to deal with it at some point. It's like a ticking time bomb, but you're just passing it around. Like, hey, is it going to come through me first, or is it going to be you, or something like that? So that's just that's kind of how it is. But
unfortunately, on this night, so it, and I remember it well. So we were coming down Highway 61, and I remember Cameron saying, "Well, because this is when the warning had just gone out for the town," and I remember we were coming in out of the north, just because of where we were positioned in addition to Lake Village earlier in the day. And I remember there were two separate highways, one just south of Rolling Fork, and then one kind of just north of Rolling Fork. So we took the highway just north of Rolling Fork that went east, and that eventually would have gone on towards the I-55 area, and then on up along the track of the storm. But just to be exact, so we took this highway, and at the time we didn't really know exactly what was going to happen, but we knew the warning was out. we knew it was there. And we actually have posted a few videos about this as well.
Yeah.
But when we saw it coming across from Lake Providence, the warning went out, and that's when it went to a tornado emergency.
Yeah.
And when it went
Actually, so it went from severe thunderstorm warning, tornado warning, PDS, tornado warning, which is kind of, you can almost put PDS and tornado emergency in almost in the same category. But it went PDS, tornado warning, and then it went to a tornado emergency. And I remember we were on that Lake Providence storm, and I was sitting there just looking at, because this is what we do. You're driving. I'm kind of keeping you updated on the radar, and I'm also keeping you abreast of the environment. And I remember telling you, I was like, this thing is heading into a straight ticking time bomb. I mean, your low-level jet was kicking in. You had sufficient amount of storm fuel or instability. You had a lot of bulk shear in place. You also had the confluent span, the vertical confluent span in place with that. So it was just, I mean, that storm was headed right into a pretty much a very, very volatile environment for it to become a significant tornado. And I was like, okay, this is going to be it. This is going to be the one that we need to be on. So yeah, it came off of Lake Providence and emerged out, became a tornado warning. It sustained its rotation. Rotation was absolutely just, mind-boggling. And went from a tornado warning, PDS tornado warning, PDS tornado warning to a tornado emergency. And folks that are not familiar with that terminology, PDS means particularly dangerous situation. That is what we call a level 2 tornado warning. You have your base tornado warning, and then you have a particularly dangerous situation tornado warning. Sometimes you can get, that's why I said earlier, it can kind of be in the same pillar with each other, because sometimes you get tornado emergency with the PDS wording. In our case, we did. And what happened was it went from that to a tornado emergency. And tornado emergency is like the level 3, the most highest of highs you can get with a tornado warning. That means that there is a catastrophic tornado on the ground moving into a populated area. It doesn't matter how big the population is.
Yep.
I just realized they took the limit off of it, so it doesn't matter what population is heading into. If it's a catastrophic tornado, they're going to call it a tornado emergency. So that's what ended up happening with that, and I saw that go off on our phone. I was like, I knew it. The environment was just too volatile for it. So,
and so when we saw this warning go out, we put ourselves in a spot where we could view it. Again, keep in mind, it's after dark, it's in the Delta. Typically you're going to be able to see these things. So what we did is we stopped in the town of Anguilla, which is about 3 to 4 miles north of Rolling Fork, and we went down Highway 414. And eventually, this would take us on up towards Silver City as well, which we didn't know at the time was going to end up being in the path of I think it was almost an 80-mile tornado that went through the state of Mississippi. But as we stopped, we turned our car and looked, and we stopped, and you could hear the roar. And let me tell you, in the middle of the night, no lights around you, and you hear the roar of a tornado coming, and you can see the power flashes.
yeah.
And the crazy thing about this is that you could almost hear the distant screams as well.
Yeah.
And this is an event, I've been chasing for 15, 18 years. And this is one event that I will never forget. It shook a lot of chase as well, but especially us as a team. Just because you could hear everything going on as it was happening.
Yeah.
We were close enough to hear it, and I remember Cameron saying, "We got to go, we got to go," and I was trying to figure out why it's saying we got to go. Then we saw the power flash, and when a tornado is moving left to right or right to left, that means you're out of the path of it.
Yeah.
But this was not moving. It was moving. The tornado was not moving at all. It was moving right at us. We were in the direct path, and ironically enough, before we realized what was happening in Rolling Fork, so we were actually on Highway 14. and we got back in the car, and we drove about 3 to 4 miles east. And we drove that 3 to 4 miles east. The tornado crossed the exact point at which we were sitting.
Yeah.
And it was at its strongest point, which eventually would go on to be rated a very high-end EF4, just about 1 mile per hour below.
Very, very, very high.
What about 5 miles per hour below?
Yeah,
EF5 ranking.
It ended up being an EF4, 195 mile per hour winch, which your threshold for EF5 is 200 plus. So
Which
I mean,
you can basically call it what it is.
You can basically call it what it is because you're just 5 miles per hour short. I mean, the damage that we saw and everything like that, it was ridiculous. But one thing I do remember, in particular, and I mean, like I said, this shook a lot of storm chasers when we were, and keep in mind, folks, we were well enough away from being safe and everything. We weren't like up and close and personal to the tornado, but whenever you are a certain distance away, you not only have to worry about the tornado, but you also have to worry about what's called RFD. That's rear frank downdraft. And basically what was going on with that is while the tornado was going on, we felt first of all, the inflow. That's the warm moist air going into the tornado. On one side of the tornado, you have your warm moist air going in, and on the other side of the tornado, you have your cool, somewhat drier air behind it, kind of like somewhat like you deal with like a hurricane or something. So, what ended up happening inside that inflow, I mean, I even saw the car starting to try to be lifted up a little bit because you had I think it was 70 to 80 mile per hour inflow winds going straight into the tornado. So at that point, that was just a combination of everything. I saw the power flashes and I saw that. I was like, okay, yeah, we gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta get out of here.
So as we moved northeast, and we actually moved northeast to stay out of the way of it.
Yeah.
And so eventually this would track, on into Silver City. But so when we went for our second intercept, we actually got into the outer rain curtains and the outer circulation of it. And so this is the closest really I've been to this high end of a tornado. We actually ended up in basically the outer edge of it.
Yeah.
The rain was coming around and you couldn't see. At this point, it had gotten wrapped in rain. But the only reason why we knew where it was, you could still hear the roar, and you saw a few more power flashes as well.
Lightning as well.
Yeah.
Lightning kind of illuminated. I know it was rain wrapped, but the lightning kind of illuminated where it was, so we had a pretty good read on it.
And so we kept going.
What was that road that we were on? This was before we intercepted the tornado. I think it was a crossroad.
Yeah.
I know it was 14 north.
Yeah, it was a 14 and like a little gravel road.
Yeah. Folks, this is, and I know we have a lot of people that are listening in that are like, weather enthusiasts or even storm chasers. That intersection right there was the difference between life and death. You would have gone north on 14. That was our escape route. And this is what we do. This is why
east on 14 was our escape route. Yeah.
East was east. Okay. East was your escape route. I think it was, what was it? Towards the tornado.
North.
It was north. So
the gravel road was going north towards the tornado.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
And that's the road we got on first.
Yeah. And then we realized, and I was like, okay, there was a road back there. Let's go. So you had an intersection right there. You go east, you got out of the path. But if you would have kept going, it'd have took you straight to it. And most cases when you're storm chasing, and we talk about this even before we even go out, we gotta plot escape routes. Like, hey, what kind of roads are here? This road may come and play later on, or something like that. So that's something that, if you're a storm chaser or something like that, if we always recommend that if you have an escape route, always use it. Because, that tornado, you had several lives lost during that and everything. So it was close. It was close. One of the closest ones I've been to.
Because, we followed this into Silver City.
Yeah, Silver City, yeah.
Where there was a ton of damage. And we actually almost got hit by a telephone pole when somebody went across live lines.
Yeah.
And so,
don't ever do that.
At first instance, we stopped in Silver City to help. And, this is where I think there were 2 or 3 lives lost in Silver City.
Which, that's sad because, I know Rolling Fork is small.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we had other towns, which we're going to talk about later on. But Silver City, I don't think anybody's really hardly talked about Silver City because it was so small. But you still had damage. You still had a loss of life there too. So
and the amazing thing about it is that the water tower was untouched. Well, everything around it was gone.
Yeah.
And at this point is when the tornado was starting to weaken a little bit before it restrained as it headed on up towards Waiona and on up towards the Armory and places like that. But, when we got to Silver City, helped and, check to see everybody was on scene. And that's when we got the call. There were multiple chasers missing. Multiple chasers hurt.
Yeah.
Also they needed help down in Rolling Fork.
Yep.
Now we were maybe 15 minutes away, and so this is probably the fastest I've ever driven back. So again, as a first responder, I do have lights on top of my car, and so I told Karen we got to go now.
Yeah.
And so we turned around and floored it back to Rolling Fork, and when we got into town, I've been through the Mayflower tornado. I've been through Jonesboro. I've been through several in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Several in Kansas. But, we were in Iowa, for that one as well. But this one here.
The Sheridan one, yeah.
But this one right here probably really, really, really hit home. Because we go into Rolling Fork, there's nothing left.
Yeah.
And there was literally, and when I say nothing, I mean nothing left, because it was, there was just buildings everywhere.
I'm gonna be honest with you, just straightforward. I'm really surprised this didn't get a 5 rating, because it legitimately looked like a nuclear bomb went off in that town. Like it was the most mind-boggling thing I've ever seen. Like I said before, I wasn't chasing with the Mayflower, the Valonia tornado, so you obviously have a different perspective.
Yeah.
On it, because you saw that firsthand. I didn't. So, what was the comparison between the two? Would you say it was worse with that one?
Comparing Mayflower and Bologna to Rolling Fork, I think it was almost the exact same.
Almost the exact same.
Again, the Mayflower Bologna in 2014 was a EF4, but it was a lower end EF4. So you keep in mind you're talking low end versus high end. You're talking almost EF5.
Yeah.
Same thing, anchor bolts bent or snapped. Stuff like that, houses wiped off their foundations. And unfortunately, with this event, with the Rolling Fork tornado, is, you had a town very similar to the Mayflower and Valonia area. Actually, it really reminds me of Rolling Fork and Silver City. Kind of remind me of that Mayflower and Valonia, because Mayflower took a lot more damage, but Valonia, took the brunt.
Yeah.
And it was kind of flip flop, with Silver City being more like Mayflower.
Yeah.
And then Rolling Fork being more like the Valonia area. But regardless, when we got into town, obviously traffic was at a dead halt, and I have pulled many people out of rubble. There was, I think what really hit home was there was a restaurant there with a trailer park behind it.
Oh.
It was full of people.
Yeah.
The restaurant was full of people, and multiple people, unfortunately died in this event, and we learned that later they pulled bodies out of the restaurant days later. But it was a brick establishment, one of the best diners on the Delta in Mississippi as well. And so cars had been tossed into the restaurant while they were trying to take cover. Just one of many stories that we heard from this event. But I remember when Cameron and I were trying to search and rescue throughout the trailer park behind this, and this is what really got it, is because you didn't have a part of it. The entire trailer park was gone. There was nothing left. And, we were pulling, we unfortunately were pulling deceased bodies out left and left and right.
And some of those, some of those people, you know, the way they were positioned looked like they were actually trying to get to shelter. And the scary part about it, and this is kind of a combination of everything. The tornado hit the tornado hit the tornado siren before it went in town, I believe.
Yeah.
And those folks, this is
The siren was their way of warning.
Yeah, this is not like Little Rock or El Dorado or Pine Bluff or anything like that. This is like very, 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 very small town Mississippi that a lot of us back in the day grew up in, especially if you're like me, like kind of our background, kind of we grew up in. You just had your sirens, you had your basic cell phone, you had your basic stuff. You didn't have all the new technology and everything because it wasn't like a big established town like Little Rock is. But that's what happened. A siren got taken out, and those poor folks, I mean, they probably didn't even know a tornado was even coming. Like, I think what ended up happening is, and this is like the worst case scenario, a tornado hit the siren right as it was trying to go off. And when that happened, I mean, somebody was probably in a restaurant, they probably briefly heard it, and they were like, what was that? And then that was it, because the siren was just gone. And, a lot of people were saying they didn't get, phones and anything like that. I mean,
because there was a cell phone tower on the outside town.
And they got hit.
And the tornado took out the cell phone tower first.
Yeah.
And so nobody got the alerts that went off. And so they didn't get alerts, that then the sirens didn't go off. And so
it was just a combination
it was
of
a
things,
worse combination thing. I think a total of 25 people died just in Rolling Fork alone.
Yeah.
Or something like that, or 25 total, but in this one 80-mile long track or tornado across the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
But
It was nuts.
that night to me really stands out just because of the amount of destruction over such a large area in such a small town.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about we're talking about brick buildings, well established buildings, and the downtown area looked like a complete war zone.
Yeah, it was.
The next day and first light really, really set the stage for what we, didn't really expect. But some of the worst stories I think for me was having to tell a father, hey, we found your son, who had just gone to spend time with his friend,
Yeah.
and or telling a son, hey, we found your dad over here, telling just the stories that you lived through. And
There was this one mom that she had lost her son, and I will never forget this, man, because it kind of struck a little home, especially with me, because it was like Rolling Fork. If you grew up in El Dorado, I mean, obviously El Dorado's now bigger than that, but El Dorado didn't used to be that big. It used to be a very small town that had your basic stuff, and that was it. And I remember going there, and I remember just telling you, I was like, man, dude, this is like bringing El Dorado, like my childhood, like how it was. And it just, it was a very, very mind-boggling thing. And just hearing that, just going through, doing the search and rescue and stuff like that, hearing the stories, just heartbreaking. I mean, it was nuts. It was just, like you said, the combination of everything, the tower getting hit, the sirens getting hit, it was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare situation, and like I said, unfortunately, we did lose those lives and stuff like that. And
and then we talked, the next day with several folks, who were involved with a teacher who lost students, students who lost a teacher. I mean, just but seeing the community. But I think what really gets me is that with this town, is that here we are almost 6 months later, and there's still hardly anything's been done.
Yeah.
The state of Mississippi, we're up and down to help these folks in this town, and hardly anything has been done. We've had followers go through there. We've had other people on our team have been through, and there's quote unquote some rebuilding going on, but they're having to do it themselves. It's not Again, as you know, it takes time for this stuff to happen.
Yeah,
but,
I was gonna say it doesn't happen overnight, but
right,
the problem is, it's
but
just
you have a whole town
yeah,
that now is down to 2 businesses
yeah,
versus the extent of what they had, and you know, for me, just the people who survived that, you know, in when they had nothing, and you know, this was a town that already had nothing.
yeah,
You know, they were a bunch of farmers
Yeah.
who were just happy to have what they had.
Mhm.
And then a town, I remember, you know, we heard stories about they've never been hit. They never had able to go to the north, go to the south, go to the east, go to the west. And this is a testament of where tornadoes don't care about paths.
But you know, just thinking about that, you know, before Rolling Fork hit, we had a lot of that. You know, we had a lot of people talk about that here in Arkansas because they'll be like, you know, Little Rock's never been hit. And Little Rock, you know, it's always gone north, it's gone south, or you know, it's lifted before it got here. And I think the one thing that this year has proven is that most of those claims are myths. Like
Yep.
it can hit a metropolitan area. It can go over mountains. It can go over lakes. It can hit the towns that it normally doesn't get hit. Like this year has changed the perspective on just everything. Not you know everything severe weather-wise. Everything just you know in general.
And it's proven, you know, that you don't necessarily have to have all the ingredients in place at one time.
Exactly.
You know, and it's proven that you don't. I mean, it's proven that you know you have to rely on other sources as well.
Yeah.
Because you know, Rolling Fork for us, you know, we lost radar, we lost cell phone service. You know, we had to rely on our instinct, on our visibility.
Yeah.
You know, on our maps. You know, we had to rely the old school way of doing things
Yeah, it
because
was old
there
school.
was not a new because you know your quote unquote new school technology was useless. Because when a tornado takes out every doggone 5G tower between the Mississippi River and I-55, you know you're kind of left with a little bit of what to do.
Matter of fact, I don't even think you had the service to even call 911.
You didn't.
You just had the basic stuff. I know what was it? The emergency management. You know, they have their own little way of communicating. But like, if you're just a basic person, I mean, you didn't even have service. There was a lot of people that were, you know, that knew that we were out chasing. You know, they were concerned. You know, Rolling got hit. They couldn't get in contact with us. We had no, you know, you had nothing. It was like you were out in the middle of nowhere with no service, no nothing. You can't call 911 or anything like that. So it was.
And it also proved to watch
yeah.
your surroundings too, because
definitely.
while we were doing search and rescue, there was another tornado warning. If you
I remember that. I
remember one touchdown in the neighborhood across from where we were doing search and rescue. Now this was back in Silver City.
Yeah.
But another one had touched down and quickly moved through. So now you had people already scattered about. Now you had a second one to go through, but there was no warning because there were no phones, because there were no sirens, because power was out, tornado sirens down, etc.
Yeah. You're just going off of you're just going off the structure. You're going off of sound. You're just going off of your instinct at that point.
But you know, Cameron, this event just proved that you know when it comes to severe weather, you have to rely on your instincts.
Yep.
You have to rely on your safety because you know there were several chasers that got too close, and yes, it's in the Delta not, but chasing in the Delta versus chasing in the plains is two totally separate things.
One got lifted
because
up.
One goes 20 to 30 miles per hour in the plains, can go 60 to 70 down east of the Mississippi, and unfortunately, you know, we saw that happen on March 2024.
Yeah.
So, you know, with that it proved, don't get too close because you can get rolled, you can get, you know, yourself or even your partners in danger.
That's what I was saying earlier on with that crossroad. And that's why, you know, me and Derek work really great as a chase team because we both have the same instinct, like, hey, I want to get back home with the car and everything intact. So what we did is, like you said before, there was an east option. That was your escape route. If you would have kept going, it took you towards Tornado. Now here's the thing: we went that way just for an extent, just to see what, you know, how everything was developing. We heard it. The moment I heard it, I told you, let's go. We got to go. And we turned around and we went east. We got on that state route and we were gone. I mean, I think we did what was it, 90 to 100 mph
Yeah.
on that escape route, trying to get out of the path, and
Yeah.
that's just instinct. That's just having that sense of awareness, like, hey, and I think that was actually before it got to its maximum strength. I heard it. It was like
No, Rolling Forward was its maximum
It
strength.
was maximum strength, yeah. And when it was, I think at that point it was just developing.
Yep.
It was developing. This is way before it hit the town, and I just heard it. And then another thing, you also want to trust your gut instinct with this as well. I know you have your primary instinct, but your gut instinct will get you out of a lot of situations. And I was just sitting there. I was like, I have a bad feeling about this one. For some reason, I got a bad feeling about it. So let's go. And I kid you not, guys. We got on that escape route, and I mean, it touched down. We had power flashes, and I remember this, and I'll never forget it. I turned around. We were driving. I turned around, looked out the passenger window, and all you saw was just this monster wedge. I mean, it was an absolute monster. The lightning just illuminated it, and it was an absolute monster of a wedge, guys. So, anybody that's listening to this, safety always comes first when you're chasing. You can always sell footage at any given point, but selling footage is not worth sacrificing your life for. You always want to be safe when you're doing something like this, guys. So.
Yep. But again, to those folks in Rolling Fork, again, we never,
my heart
we
goes out to
will
them, yeah.
never forget this event, because this
Yeah.
event really shaped, I think, how we've chased the rest of this year,
Yeah.
and probably how we're going to chase going forward as well. But again, it's just going to show that times are changing. Severe weather's changing, the atmosphere is changing, and again, it just goes to show you that all it takes is one event to make a spring bad.
Yep.
And little did we know a week later what we were dealing with. Of course, we have a podcast on that, going over the wind and the Little Rock event from March 30th, 31st.
Yeah.
Needless to say, those back-to-back weeks
Oh.
really kind of racked our brains a little bit.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of chasing done. But it was a whole lot of effort put in. And unfortunately, though, between the two events, we had a total of 28 lives lost in two events.
Yeah. And the thing about that was, during the March 31st event, Little Rock, just after, I think this was like as your 24th, you're about 7-8 days away removed from the Rolling Fork tornado. And, from a forecaster's perspective, because I doing both forecasting and chasing, it takes a lot of mental fortitude to package yourself back up and get yourself back on that horse and say, hey, you gotta cover these folks, because these folks are depending on you. And the one thing I just kept hearing before the Little Rock tornado went down was a lot of people were, just like, hey, this is not gonna happen. It's gonna, don't worry about it, stuff like that. I was like, guys, we cannot do that. We cannot afford to let our guard down. This is why we stress so much 24/7 when severe weather strikes. You always got to be prepared, no matter the circumstances, because Rolling Fork hits so close to home. And then, unfortunately, we had, the Little Rock tornado, the wind tornado, just about 8 days removed from that. And I was just telling people, I was like, you got to be weather aware. If severe weather busts, that's awesome, that's great. But in that situation, I mean, it was just, yeah. Trying to package yourself up and get back to that horse was not easy.
And, little did we know what we would see going forward through the rest of spring.
Yeah.
And, we've seen more EF3, EF234s this year than we've seen in the previous 10 years combined.
Yeah.
And, that just goes to show you that, hey, and we're going to have a whole podcast about this coming up. El Nino, when you go to an El Nino pattern, El Nino tends to produce some of the worst severe weather across this part of the country.
Yeah.
But again, obviously, we're gonna have a podcast on that coming up as well. Then, of course, obviously, we're gonna have a podcast coming out as well, going over our 21 event as well. We hope
Snowmageddon. Yeah.
And then, of course, obviously, we're getting into football season as well. coming up soon. We're going to talk a little bit about what weather and the forecasting impacts it has on both the baseball seasons and the football season around the state. Not just for our colleges, but for our minor league teams, stuff like that as well.
Definitely.
But again, obviously, we do want to give a shout out, to our sponsors, Crown Mile Ranch, local roofing and construction, Natural State Wireless, Diamond State Dent, removal, and and BBB Arkansas. Without them, none of this would be possible.
Definitely. And also want to kind of give a quick shout out to our awesome Patreon supporters, Jesse Smith, Tiffany Dyson, Pam Webb, Brett Wolf, also Amy Smith, and the rest of our Patreon supporters, guys. As always, we wouldn't be here doing all of this if it wasn't for our Patreon supporters and our sponsors. We love doing this, guys. We love giving this information out for free and everything. I do want to kind of throw a shout out real quick. If you are interested in either becoming a Patreon supporter, or if you have a business and you want to become a sponsor, send us an email, arkansasweatherwatchers@gmail.com, or you can always find that Patreon supporter link in the comments or wherever you listen to this in. So other than that, guys, like I said, one more thing I want to throw out is Rolling Fork. There's a lot of survivors, not even just in Mississippi, but in Arkansas too. There's a lot of people that they refuged out of Rolling Fork and came to Arkansas. My heart goes out to them.
Yep.
The entire team's heart goes out to them.
Rolling Fork,
and we will rebuild, and we will be stronger than ever.
Yep. Rolling Fork, Silver City, Amory. I actually did a more video over this immediately after as well.
Yeah.
But for our folks at Rolling Fork, Amory, Silver City, Wynona, our hearts go out to you as well. Same thing for our folks in Little Rock and Wynn as well.
Yeah.
Anyone
that's been impacted by severe weather this year.
These two events really kind of set the stage. We have a podcast on both of them now. Our hearts go out to you as always. Mississippi strong, Arkansas strong. We will rebuild. And if there's one thing I know about the South, we are very, very resilient, and we come back stronger.
Definitely. So, as always, guys, be sure to tune into the next podcast episode, and we'll continue to keep you guys updated right here, your source for all things Arkansas weather.